Hello and welcome to Designing and Building Custom Apps Using Dynamics 365, Volume 1. I'm Scott Giroux and I'm a Microsoft MVP and I work for Develop One in the UK as a solution architect. I've been working with Dynamics CRM, as it was called back then, since version 1.1 and I've been extending it ever since. And it's almost not even a recognizable product anymore. But what hasn't changed is Microsoft's continuous improvements and investment in this amazing platform. I'm the author of the Ribbon Workbench, which allows you to customize the command bar or the ribbon, and also the open source framework, Sparkle XRM, which allows you to extend the user interface using JavaScript and HTML. I'm also a regular speaker at the CRM UG in the UK, so if ever that way, I'd really love to see you. And if you're not already involved in an online community or a local CRM user group, I'd really encourage you to, because it's great to be able to share experiences, what works, what doesn't work. Course overview. Firstly, a quick word on prerequisites. I'm expecting that you're already familiar with the MB2 716 Microsoft course syllabus, and you can navigate around Dynamics CRM 365. You can use the features, and you can customize it, so you can add entities and attributes and forms and views, etc. And you can also write simple JavaScripts and HTML web resources. Also, add plugins and workflow and custom activities, and you've got a good understanding of how to extend it. But we're going to be taking those skills and we're going to be extending them, so you'll be able to do some more advanced customizations. So on this course, we're going to be developing an application called Spaceflight 365. Now, we've been asked by a customer to create a customer engagement app to allow customer services to book passengers on a brand new spaceflight service. So take their details, take any passengers' details that they're traveling with, and select their seats on a particular flight, and then also be able to monitor the status of those flights and provide updates back to our customers. And so the ethos of this course is that although this is a development course, we're going to look at how to write extensions. Before we jump in and write code, we can always look at how far we can push the platform to provide the most functionality using out-of-the-box features. Now, this might sound a bit counterproductive for a development course, but really we have to remember that every line of code, every extension that we create has always got a total cost of ownership. And every piece of customization we're going to have to test, and we're going to have to upgrade with future versions. And so that's why before we jump in and code, we're going to look at how far we can push the platform. So what are we going to learn? First, we're going to look at getting ready. I'm going to set up our Visual Studio development environment, and then we're going to move on to looking at the application design and find the right balance between customizing and extending. And then we're going to look at DevOps. Now, DevOps is a buzzword that we often hear, but it's about automating the tasks that we have to do over and over again. So we can have more time to develop and add value. And then we're going to look at some data integration tasks. And this is a common thing that we often find, that we have to bring data in from external systems and also send data out. And then after that, we're going to look at some of the more overlooked aspects of building apps. Now, these are things like multilingual, multi-currency, and some of the more standard features of Dynamics 365, like activity tracking, and how we make sure that our custom functionality is going to work in the mobile app and in the Outlook app. And then from that, we're going to look at actually extending the app. So we're going to be creating our UI to create bookings on seats and selecting the seats and extending the form user interface. And so eventually we're going to have a fully functional application that will be able to satisfy all of the requirements and hopefully leave a very satisfied customer. Now, often we hear these statistics which kind of start the project off on a bit of a negative stance, like, 70% of the projects fail because whatever reason. But what I find in my projects is the best way to start is to look at how we're going to measure success. So looking forward to when we've developed and we've actually deployed our application, how are we going to know if this is successful or not? So let's think about the construction industry. Now, I don't often like to compare with the construction industry because there's a big difference between code and bricks and mortar, in that once you've built a building, you can't refactor it. It would be very expensive to take it down and change it. However, I think there's a lot we can learn from the construction industry. So I'm a solution architect, but let's take a building architect. And what would happen normally is that a customer would go to an architect and say, I'd like you to build us a building. And the architect will say, okay, well, what are the guiding principles? What are the key things that you're interested in? And so the customer might say something like, environmentally friendly, and maybe it must be a beautiful concept. But the thing that the solution architect or the building architect does is that they don't go and start building it and say, ta-da, here it is. What they're going to do is they're going to build a model, and maybe a cardboard model or maybe a virtual walkthrough. But they're trying to get feedback, and they're trying to get the feeling for how the customer thinks about their model before they actually build it. So, and this is the key thing, I think, that is the success part of the success of a project, is looking at collaboration with your customer rather than the contract. Rather than saying, where are the requirements? Right, we've built something from your requirements. There, you got it. Is that saying, okay, well, we use the requirements as a guiding principle, but primarily collaboration between us and our customer. And our customer is not necessarily the person who's paying the bills. The customer is going to be the person who's representing the end users, somebody who's really in tune with what actually they're doing on a day-to-day basis. So we'll have our customer come to us and say, well, we'd like to build a Spaceflight 365 application, and what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, well, what is it that you'd like? So we have a workshop or something, and then they're going to give us a requirements document. But rather than jump in and write our code, we want to be able to create some like UI mock-ups, because just like a cardboard cutout of a building, using PowerPoint or Visio to actually demonstrate what it might look like is going to be far easier to get feedback from our customers. They might say, well, this works, but this doesn't quite work, and then we can go and change it, because it's easier to change a PowerPoint. We can drag and drop something than it is to actually go and change our code. And it's really also important for that person who's doing that mock-up to already have an understanding of Dynamics CRM. And so that starts the journey of educating our customer on actually what Dynamics does. Some of the constraints, because Dynamics is an incredibly flexible environment and it allows it to very quickly get functionality. But some things we don't want to be able to have to change. So like navigation and the way that form layouts, it would be very expensive to have to suddenly rip out the way that Dynamics builds the forms and completely replace that. So our UI mockups want to have a good understanding of how Dynamics works. So we can start that education and train on how it works. So going forwards, they can see the benefit of using the out-of-the-box functionality rather than building something bespoke. So some of the other things that we often forget about, firstly, is document management. It's really important to have a central place like SharePoint where we can all store documents. How many times have you emailed somebody an attachment and they've taken that attachment and they've changed it and they send it back and it gets ping-ponged around a number of different people, and then eventually you find you're looking at a document and saying, no, that's not the right version. That's way out of date. But by having something in SharePoint, and also maybe having a team principle that you only ever send links to documents rather than attachments, it's worth thinking about. So that brings us on to having a team communication and transparency strategy. So maybe something like TFS, Visual Studio Online, or Trello, whatever you like using, and maybe Microsoft Teams or Slack, some place where you can have these links and you can have these conversations, so everyone can see what they're working on and they can see design decisions that need making. So, and having a user adoption pulse, which I like to call it, having something like the heartbeat of the project. So you're constantly seeing where you are, your customer understands the kind of decisions and the challenges that we've got, allows everyone to see where we are and in respect of where we're trying to get to. But then lastly, consistency. And I think this is one of the primary goals of this course, is that quite often we're presented with challenges. Now, if we've done the standard Microsoft Dynamics training, we'll all be aware of what we can do in terms of customizations, but you're always going to be confronted with, well, we could do this way or we could do that way. So it's like a junction point. And consistency is really about always taking the same route, so that when we're looking at extending our code or maybe handing it over to somebody else, we'll be able to always know that if we've done it in one place in a particular technique, we'll use the same technique throughout. And also it's about taking an approach that's proven, so it's like a best practice as well. So, and that's what I'm going to help you do and help you understand those best practices in this course.